And if everybody, this meeting is being recorded. Ooh, ooh. Okay, we got that. So I'm going to get started. I want to thank you all for being here. I really appreciate it. And we have most of us on Zoom and a couple of people here. Join audio later. And I'm on my iPad so that we can facilitate a Zoom call for the people in the room. Okay, everybody. I'm Marion Haller. Some of you may not know me. I am a broker in charge here at Keller Williams. I'm also a productivity coach. I also teach classes as part of the Ignite team. I also teach the strategies classes at the Realtors Association. And one of those is the purchase contract class, which I teach usually 3 times a year. It's a 6-hour class. And that over the years seems to have made me a bit of a the go-to person for contracts. So there you go. That is why I am teaching this class today. So I'm glad to see that there's lots of experts on the Zoom call with us. So if someone wants to chime in and share with us, you know, what it is you do or that you found an effective and really good way to present something, please share that with everybody. As a matter of fact, that brings me to interrupt. I really like it when we have a conversation. So if you've got a question, please just interrupt. And for those of you on Zoom, if you're on a computer, you can just hold down your space bar to unmute yourself. If you're on an iPad or a phone, obviously you'll need to find the little button and do it that way. But just to test that, hey, everybody on Zoom, say hi.
Hey.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi, everyone.
Hi.
Aloha.
Okay, great. Awesome.
Hello.
Yeah, super. So the other thing I need a little help with is because I'm on an iPad here and the setup is a little different. I would love it if somebody helps me with the chat. So anybody who sees a comment on chat because someone is too shy to speak up, I ask you to please say, Marion, there's a chat, or read it to me, because for me to figure out how to get to the chat on my iPad is going to take a moment anyway. So just read me the question and we'll go there. So I need your help with that. So please, thank you so much. So why are you taking this class today? Or why are you being asked to take this class today? That has to do with the fact that this is an important aspect of our real estate business. And lots of people don't feel comfortable doing this, presenting a purchase contract or presenting a listing contract or listing agreement, right? So as a result, we've had some issues. We've had clients say to brokers, well, I didn't know that. I didn't know that I signed that's what I signed. I didn't realize that. And we can't have that. We can't have a buyer or a seller not know what they signed, right? So we wanted to give you an opportunity to get a demonstration of presenting a purchase contract and a listing agreement. So towards that end, I need you guys to kind of pretend you're a buyer. All right. And I am presenting to you. Now, I can't take a whole bunch of questions. Like you can just pretend like if I were a buyer, this is the question I would ask now, right? Like, I don't understand this. That's great. I don't want to go down rabbit holes. So I might stop our conversation, but you get the point, right? Like help me out and feel free if you think, or if you've heard a buyer ask this question, feel free to ask that question. Let me also say that one of the things that I do with my clients, and this could be that kind of circumstance, is I offer my clients a mock offer. You know what? And I do this with both buyers and sellers, especially people, of course, who have not done real estate lately, right? So people who don't feel comfortable with this document, don't feel comfortable with the process, they're like, what does that mean? I'm going to write up a pretend offer and we're going to have a meeting and we're going to review it as if it's a real offer so that I can answer all your questions. And we're not doing this in the heat of the moment when you're wanting to make an offer. So that's what I call a mock offer. And people, for the most part, are like, you will? Especially sellers. Sellers love having a purchase contract presented to them in advance because it's all, like, oh my God, this is a long document I've never seen before. So consider a mock offer, offering it to your clients when you're new. Okay. So that said, I need to know, please speak up. Is there anyone who doesn't have a purchase contract with you who needs me to put it on the screen?
Hi, I'm just getting in. So I have a purchase contract I just recently did for a buyer. Should I put that up on my own screen? Is that the suggestion?
That would be great. That would
Okay.
be great. I suggested you printed it out just so you can take notes on your purchase contract, but that would be great.
Okay.
If you can access it, then we don't need to worry about, we can all follow along on hard copy, right? Cool. Thank you so much, whoever that was. All right. So I have filled out a purchase contract for Pamela Purchase. Pamela is my client and Pamela is purchasing this property. So Pamela, I'm going to take you through this contract so you understand, and please feel free to ask any questions. All right. So just so you know, my broker has to sign the contract first, right? It's my broker will have reviewed it by the time we get to signature. And of course, Keller Williams is representing you right at the top. And we are members of the National Association of Realtors. And what's important about that is, as I've mentioned to you in our buyer presentation and our buyer conversation, is that we are held to a professional standard through our code of ethics. And I take that code of ethics very seriously. And it's worked for 115 years, 115 years it's governed realtors in this country. So pretty cool. Anyway, the property you are buying, we are filling out this contract on September 15th. Your property is 420 Aloha Road, right? Here's the tax map P number for that property, and that helps identify the property. So this next paragraph is kind of important. It's in bold. It says this purchase contract becomes a legally binding contract for the purchase of real estate upon execution by the parties. Read it carefully, right? It talks about what happens if there's handwritten notes on the contract, but we don't really do handwritten notes anymore. But if there were a handwritten note, every party to the contract would need to initial that handwritten note. Okay. The first section on the purchase contract is agency, and you might go like, really? That's the most important thing. So the reason agency is first is because the government that rules real estate wants you to be aware that you're in an agency relationship. And we've already talked about that, but that's why it's on page 1. And I just want to read that the contract actually says this under AB. For buyer's agent, it says buyer's agent owes the highest duties to the buyer, including confidentiality, loyalty, due care, and diligence. Those are elements of fiduciary responsibility. And I love that it's here right on page 1 to remind you that our contract talks about this as well, right? It's not just me talking about it. Yeah. All right. So let's go to section A2, just to let you know the seller is represented in this case by Coldwell Banker, and I am, and Keller Williams is representing you. Okay, now we go to the bottom of page 1, and here it's about the earnest money deposit. And you had mentioned to me that you would prefer to wire transfer the earnest money deposit in. Is that correct? Yeah, you still want to do that? Okay, so you'll be asked to do that, or you'll have to do that within 3 business days of the day that the seller accepts or that you and the seller both sign a contract. Okay, great. Top of page 2 takes us to the offer to buy. And we are saying that this offer is good until 2 days from now, September 17th at 4 p.m. So that's kind of standard, right? And yeah. And as we discussed, we are saying here that you're going to put an earnest money deposit of $20,000 and an additional earnest money deposit of $20,000 will be due 2 days after you accept your inspection period. Now we're going to review again what that inspection period is all about, but we've talked about that, right? So is that still okay with you? Questions, anyone? Okay. Then your down payment balance is $235,000. Yes, that balance of the down payment for a total of $275,000 and a loan of $800,000. And it's by conventional financing at prevailing rates and terms. So someone might ask me here and say, well, I don't, interest rates are going up and just prevailing rates. And let me explain that. Yes. We cannot lock an interest rate here on this contract. I mean, technically you could, but do you really need to? Aren't you in fact going to move as quickly as possible to apply for this loan and lock your rate? And you'll be discussing that with your lender, yeah? The only time I would consider stating an interest rate in the contract is if somebody absolutely cannot purchase beyond that interest rate, right? They can't afford a higher interest rate. Then you would say at an interest rate not to exceed 6% or something like that. If we were to write something like to be approved by the buyer, that's not going to work. We can't do that because interest rates change. And part of what you're accepting here is the fact that interest rates change and it's up to you to lock your interest rate as soon as possible. Great. All right. So now we have the addenda. Are there any addenda to this contract? And there is, yes. So remember, you're pretending to be a buyer.
Yes,
So
I
cool.
want to ask my seller to buy down my points.
So you would like to add a clause into, you want a credit from the seller so that you have money for closing costs. And that would allow you to buy down your rate. Is that what you're saying?
I believe so. I mean, I just heard, I haven't put this into a contract yet, but I've heard that one of the things you can do is ask them to buy down your points.
It's true, you can. The problem is that you're putting quite a significant down payment. But if you needed to do that, we could certainly do that in section Q. So let me make a note and go show you how to do a buy down.
Cool. I wasn't sure if that needed to be worked in here.
No, that is a Q section because it simply says, right, seller agrees to credit the buyer $10,000 at closing costs to cover closing costs. That's all it's going to say.
Oh, okay.
The reason for the for that credit is going to be discussed in email correspondence back and forth, right?
Okay.
The thing is that now if you do that, the seller is actually only going to get $1,065,000 because they're giving you 10,000.
Right.
So you need to make sure that that's the price you want to offer.
Right.
Right. So we can talk about that in a bit, but that's the concern here.
Okay.
All right. So addenda, there are no addenda. Are you sure? We could consider an as-is addendum. It's attractive to sellers at this point. And we could even qualify our as-is addendum by saying that the buyer agrees to make repairs up to $2,000. And by saying it that way, it kind of says to the seller, well, we're not going to nickel and dime you, but if there are larger repairs, we might come back. Would you like to add an as-is addendum with that kind of caveat? Right, and this is something you might want to discuss. So I wanted to mention something before I got started, and I neglected to do that, which is there's kind of a cheat or a shortcut to this process. And the cheat is that I don't know, I'm not doing this without looking at a contract, right? I just look at the header of the next paragraph and explain what that paragraph is about. So I'm not doing this by heart. I just wanted to encourage you, right? That as we go along, that's what we're doing here. Okay, great. All right. Description. This is the description of the property for,
Marion?
yes.
Joyce here. Hi. I have
Hi.
a question going back to C2. Do you normally, I know it can be either or, is it 2 business days after J1, just in case if it falls on a weekend, or is that something, I know it's in our template, but we're also advised to populate without using the template.
I use 2 business days after J1 just because it's a money transfer, right? It's about transferring funds. And so people are busy approving J1 and then can notify their banker to transfer funds. And yes, because it's a money transfer item, it would move to the next business day if it were to fall on a Saturday or Sunday. But I still use that to allow for a little time. Does that make, okay? Thank you.
Thank you.
Sure. All right, so description of the property. This is a fee simple property. That means you're gonna own. That means you're going to own the title and own the land and have full ownership rights to that property. The alternative being leasehold. This is not leasehold. And this is 2 acres plus a 3-bedroom, 3-bath house and a 2-bedroom, 1-bath ohana and all other improvements thereon. Right, so you're getting everything. All right, what's included? So inclusions are, I've written down 2 air conditioners because we sell 2 air conditioners, right? Cable TV, 4 ceiling fans are in this property. So I've put that in as number 4, yeah. Dishwasher, disposal, there are 2 dryers. We're getting the existing window coverings, which for the most part is just blinds, right? Yeah, the microwave is included. We're getting 2 ranges, right? 1 ohana, 1 in the main house, 2 refrigerators, 2 washers and 2 water heaters. So that's what's included in terms of the appliances, okay? So just as an FYI, I put numbers in those pupas, not just X's. Okay. Is there a photovoltaic system? There is not a photovoltaic system. Is any furniture included? No, it's not. So there is no furniture on this. Just to digress for a moment, if this were a condo, I would cover the fact that yes, you're buying the furniture. The seller has 7 days to provide you with a list of that furniture, and you will have 5 days to approve that list. Okay. Are there any exclusions? In this instance, there are. We are excluding, or the seller is excluding the swing set that's in the backyard, right? They mentioned that to us already. And so that will not be included. All right, closing matters. So we are writing this contract for a 45-day closing. And just to remind you, there's really 42 days because we take 3 days to record and send all the paperwork to the Bureau of Conveyances. So I will be telling you in greater detail what happens along the way of escrow, but we're writing this for a 45-day closing. Additionally, as per F3, there is a unilateral right to extend this contract for either party of 15 days. That's the way this is written. So let me just explain that. Unilateral means you or the seller could exercise this right to extend the contract without getting approval from the other. You are agreeing to this upfront now. So it can only be called once. So whoever calls it first gets to call that extension. If an additional extension is needed, the parties can certainly agree to that, right? You can oftentimes, even with an extension, you know, sometimes there are issues or the lender needs more time, and it's to everybody's best interest to grant another 5, 7, or 10 days to allow something to be completed. So it's not like you can't extend it again, but you would need signature from the seller as well as from you to do that. All right. Escrow, we are an escrow state, which means our transactions are handled by an escrow company and an escrow officer. They are an independent, third party, impartial. You are hiring them together with the seller at equal cost to you. You are splitting the cost of the escrow officer and the escrow services. And escrow is going to hold the money, and they're going to make sure that all parties agree every time we move forward with the contract. So that's how we handle our items here. Escrow is also going to be the company that issues you title insurance. So do you have any concerns? I have selected First Hawaii Title. Jerry Shannon is out of our KEA office. It doesn't really matter where she is, where the escrow officer is, but I've done lots of work with Jerry and she's awesome. I like working with her. So, and the seller's agent was also fine with using Jerry Shannon, if that's okay with you. Awesome. Okay. Just as an aside, personally, I have had one instance where a client didn't want to use a certain escrow company and was specific. I've had numerous clients where people have said, well, Marion, I just sold something on the mainland and that was Fidelity, and they agreed to give me a discount. And so I would like to use Fidelity, right? Now, I would have asked that question earlier and found that out. But just to be clear here, oftentimes escrow companies will honor each other's discounts. So if I say, I hear you, that's fine. May I find out if Jerry will honor that discount? Would you consider working with Jerry? Or I just move the transaction to Fidelity. Either way is possible. But just so you know, that discount would be honored. Okay. Prorations and closing adjustments. Just so you know that escrow takes care of prorations. So prorations means like your taxes and any HOA dues, or in this case, rents, right, would be prorated. So if you close at the middle of the month, the seller is responsible for the expense to the middle of the month, and then you would take on the expense from the 16th on. So there would be some credits and debits going on, right? Property taxes are obviously 6 months. They're paid in 6 months installments here. So whatever portion of the 6 months the seller pays, and then you pay the remainder of the 6 month installment. So that's prorated by escrow. All right, closing costs. We talked about this already, but just to review again, you're going to be asked to pay 40% of the title insurance. Now that's a little unusual. In other states, sellers pay all the title insurance, but here in Hawaii, this is kind of the norm. Costs for drafting the mortgage, costs of buyer's consents, buyer's notary fees, recording fees, 50% of the escrow fee, any association fees, and any FHA or VA, and this is a conventional loan, so that is not applicable. The one item that's not listed here is insurance. You are getting a loan and you're going to have to pay the 1-year deposit and 3 months of payment on your homeowner's insurance and hurricane insurance. You are required to carry hurricane insurance in Hawaii when you purchase a single family home. All right, notice of conveyance tax. The conveyance tax is paid by the seller, but it matters how you intend to use the property. So as a homeowner, the seller, you are going to be the owner occupant, the seller gets a lower rate. If you were to use this as an investment property and rent it out, the seller would be asked to pay a higher rate. So what this says is that my understanding is, and you're saying that you're going to be an owner occupant. And if you were to change your mind, you have 15 days to change your mind in case you decide to make it an investment property. After the 15 days, the difference between the tax rates would become your expense. It's more expensive. The taxes are higher on an investment property than they are on an owner occupant property. So that's what that's about. You're not planning to change your mind, are you? Or are you thinking about that, right? No. Okay, cool. All right. Okay. The paintings are falling off the wall here. All right. That takes us to assessments. And assessments would be something like if your neighborhood association decided to repave the sidewalk or repair the gate if you're in a gated community, or put up new light fixtures, or in some way ask all of the members of the homeowners association to share in the expense of something. And so there are several types of assessments. There's either a lump sum assessment that has been billed, and if there is such a bill, we're asking the seller to pay for it. Section B says if there are assessments, that's the top of page 4, if there are assessments being paid over time, then we're asking the seller to pay for those. And we're asking the seller to pay up to the closing date, and then you would take over those prorated assessments, because it could be going on for another 5 years. It's because they repaved the sidewalk 2 years ago and everybody got billed, $35 a month for 5 years, whatever it might be. And so you're going to get the benefit of anything that is an assessment at this point. So it's equitable to prorate that. If there were to be a new assessment announced during escrow, you would have a chance to review that, and you would have the opportunity to cancel if you chose to say, I'm not willing to pay that assessment. I don't want to take that on. Okay. All right. Consents, that's just, that would really pertain mostly to a leasehold property, doesn't pertain here. Risk of loss, we just like to remind everybody, risk of loss passes to you at 8 o'clock in the morning on day of recordation. So your insurance policy is going to cover you from that day on. Keys to the property have to be transferred. I'll make sure we get those. And that takes us to the preliminary title report. So you might go like, why is it called preliminary title report? Well, the title report that they pull on like the day that it goes to the bureau is the final title report, right? So this is a preliminary report, but it's really the ultimate report. Nothing else is going to happen to that title report in the 30 or 45 days that we're in escrow. And the title report is going to reflect any kind of documents that are appended to the property, like if there's an easement, or if there's an encroachment agreement because something encroaches, and other elements such as mineral rights defer to the state of Hawaii, and water rights, whether there are, if there were a stream, that sort of thing. So your title report should arrive within 5 days of opening escrow, and we'll review that together.
Marion, I have a quick question.
Yeah.
Would it be possible in the future for you to teach a class on reading title reports?
Sure.
Okay, thank you.
Ask Michelle.
Who's Michelle?
She's our principal broker.
Oh, sorry. Sorry. I was like, wait. Okay, thanks so much.
Okay, you bet. All right. So you're going to get that. Keep having to do this. You're going to get that title report, and you're going to have 7 days to review it. We'll review it together. There's usually not an issue. If there were an issue on the title report, we're giving the seller 10 days to fix it. And if the seller can't fix it, you can either choose to take the property with whatever is on title that isn't acceptable, sort of, kind of, maybe. We would have to look at what it is, right? Or you would have the option to cancel.
And I do have another question
Yeah.
regarding title. Is it ever possible to sell a home where the original documents for title are missing? So I have a listing. The client can't find his original transference of deed, like, so it doesn't say his name on it. It's still in his deceased parent's name, and he doesn't have the original title. Like,
Okay,
there's a gap.
So there's this is a question for an attorney.
Yeah.
Because if this person legally inherited the property, right, through a trust or through a will, then the transfer would not be difficult. If there was no will or trust, now probate would need to get involved. And so you would need, right, we cannot list a property that is owned by dead people. So I'm afraid the title is most important here. So yes, you would need to work with your client to clear that title. Oftentimes finding death certificates is what's needed. This is a common problem with usually one person on title having passed away, and the heirs need to find a death certificate to get them off of title. That's not an uncommon situation. But in this case, if your client isn't on title and the parents are, and they're both deceased, in order to sell, he needs to get himself on title and get them off. And I suggest you see an attorney, or he see an attorney.
Yeah, thank you.
You bet. Okay, so vesting and tenancy on a G3, lower portion of page 4, is about how you're going to take title. And I can, there's several things, like you've all heard of, tenancy in common and tenancy. There's lots of different, or there's 4 different kinds actually. And escrow is going to ask you that. And as a single purchaser, you are going to take possession as tenancy by the, what is it? What is it? Somebody tell me, help me out here. Is it the entirety?
By the entirety.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you, right? You are it, you are the entire buyer. That's why it's called that. So tenancy by the entirety, thank you. However, please refer to your, call your escrow officer if you want more clarification about what that means. Okay, and that takes us to the financing portion and cash funds. So we're saying here that there is no contingency, right? Because this money is in your account. And so we're going to provide evidence of that money in your account within 3 days of acceptance. And the seller has 2 days to say, well, that's not good enough for me, which of course they're not going to say, as long as we show them a bank statement. And so I've said here that we are going to show a bank statement and an investment statement. Is that accurate? Is that where your monies are? Okay, cool. And no trouble, right? Getting a copy of your statement off the internet. You can just print it and download it as a PDF and send it to me. All right, so we're going on. So there's H2 doesn't apply, but H3 is our financing contingency. And it basically, it says that the buyer is hereby saying that they're going to mortgage this property and obtain a loan, and that they agree to purchase, and that the lender agree to provide the various documents such as a conditional loan approval, and then notification of the removal of those conditions, and the explanation of the due dates of those financing of this financing contingency are then in section H4. So in section 4, we're saying we're providing a pre-qualification letter within 5 days. Now we've already got your pre-approval letter, so I'm going to submit that pre-approval letter for the purchase price. But in case, we're trying to get a good price here. In case the seller comes back and wants a higher price than you agree to a higher price, we're going to need to provide a new pre-qualification or pre-approval letter to match the final price. And that's why we're going to do it again, and why it gives us 5 days to do that. We're then asking that we're going to provide conditional loan approval. So what's conditional loan approval? So your lender is going to say, yes, we approve you for a loan, except I still need you to verify your employment from 3 years ago, or some, there'll be a few conditions that you'll need to still fulfill. But other than those, they approve the loan. It's a conditional loan approval. So we say 15 days before closing. So that would be at day 30. And then 8 days later, all those conditions need to have been removed. So again, your proof of having worked somewhere, we'd need that in 8 days, or we would have to extend the contract and say we need a little more time, whatever that might be. All right, so I just want to point out on H5, what H5 says is if we are late with any of these items and we don't extend, but if we're late, the seller has a right to cancel the contract. So we don't want to be late with any of these, and that's my job. I'm in charge of tracking the timeline and letting you know when due dates are coming up. And I'll also be in touch with your lender. But I just want you to know that the seller, who doesn't have a lot of rights to cancel, does have a right to cancel if we don't do this on time.
Marion, can I add a little something to that?
Yes, yes.
I mean, I was in a situation a couple years ago where and this is something on the seller side and on the buyer side to really note this one line, because the buyer's agent put an actual date for the conditional loan approval. And my seller wanted to cancel, and I said, you can't. I told her numerous times. Well, then we saw this date, which I've never seen before, that and after. And because this buyer's agent put an actual date, we were able to cancel, because there was no way they were going to be able to satisfy that the appraisal wasn't until that date. And they have to have the appraisal per the purchase contract in order to have a conditional loan approval. So it was a caveat that allowed my seller to get out of the contract. Otherwise, she would have had to sell her house and had no recourse. So it's one of those things that, sometimes in our excitement of accepting an offer or writing one, I would say, in my opinion, never put a date. And if you see a date and you're on the seller side, then
So what she's referring to is the second puka in H4, where we have it written 15 days before closing date. So if you were to move closing, the conditional loan approval moves as well, right? Which is very handy. When you fill these in with dates, it gets very tight. So now H5, just so you understand, the seller's right to cancel gives the seller a few extra days to decide to cancel. Like the seller might wait for a few days, but based on what our termination provision says in the contract, there's these extra days, right? And that's what our job is, to make sure that our sellers are aware. You've got extra days here to think about this. Well, I don't want to just be hard on them, right? And so they might not cancel right away, but they might cancel 3 or 4 days later. Yeah. Okay. All right. That takes us to section I, mandatory seller's disclosure and real estate transactions. So this is the seller's obligation to disclose everything to you that they know about the property. This is not a warranty. This is just letting you know. So there's a couple of things. They're going to let you know, important things as well as some minor things. Like we want to get a repair history on the property, and this is a way that we can find out, what repairs have been made, that sort of thing. So we're asking the seller to provide that after 4 days. I don't like waiting for 7. I don't like it. So I write contracts for 4 days on the seller's disclosure. And then if the seller has any new information to share, they're going to provide new information. Like, let's say all of a sudden the toilet leaks while we're in escrow, right? In the toilet. Yeah. So now the seller has to amend the disclosure statement and tell you, well, I had a little flood in the bathroom and the toilet leaked and I've had it repaired. And they're obligated to tell us that in 4 days. Okay. Now, if that happens, you might want to go to the house and look at the damage and just see what's going on, right? So we certainly would have a right to do that. And given that new information, you would have a new chance to reconsider buying the house. So that would be paragraph I3. Paragraph I3 says we have to give a receipt for the seller's disclosure within 3 days. You're going to have 7 days to review the seller's disclosure. And let me just tell you, we're going to go back and forth a little bit, get clarification, ask questions. That's all okay. But if there is new information about the toilet leak that comes later, we're going to have 15 days to review that. And the reason we want that is because if there is some sort of major leak or some, big repair, you will probably want to get a contractor in to review that. So that's why we offer 15 days there. And then section I4 says when you do your inspection and the inspector finds some major disrepair, like all the post and piers under the decks are rotted, right? Just odd stuff happens. Then you would now be able to say to the seller, I discovered new information and I get 15 days to figure out what I want to do based on this new information that I discovered. Make sense? Yeah, okay, good. Yeah, so that's why those are designed to give you some extra time so that you can talk to contractors. All right, that takes us down to I-6, general disclosures. Now, these are some elements that may or may not apply, but our contract covers them because they come up frequently. So the first one is government and private restrictions disclosure. So this pertains to land use, zoning, building permits, requirements, rebuilding requirements, setbacks, height limitations, all that kind of stuff. You understand that you can inspect and we can find out all there is to know about this property. However, there are some properties, and this may be one of them, we'll find out that doesn't have a permit for everything, right? Or that is in a setback, not unheard of, certainly not in haiku. So, so there are some limitations there, nothing any different than in any other state, really. Building permit disclosure, yeah, we do have a lot of issues on building permits. I'm actually not, the only concern we have on this house or this property are the decks. It would appear to me that the decks are not, they were added and expanded and they're probably not permitted. So we'll do more investigation into that and find out what the seller's disclosure says. Top of page 7. Asbestos disclosure. So asbestos disclosure would be necessary if the property was built before 1979. This was not built prior to 1979, so that doesn't really apply. Hazardous waste and toxic substances. If we discover on the property that there are old cars parked there or something to that nature, and if you recall, back in the corner of the lot, there is a little shop or something, right? And it looks like somebody worked on cars back there. So we might want to find out a little bit more about that area. Now, I know you're interested in organic gardening, so I just want to point that out to you, that there could be something there. All right, wastewater disposal disclosure. This property is on a septic system for the main house and a cesspool for the Ohana. So we are going to request that the wastewater system be uncovered so that you can have it inspected. And I'm going to do my best to help you learn all there is to know about septic systems and cesspools. Unfortunately, we have a great source. Our Valley Isle Pumping Company has a great website that if you get into escrow and you buy this property, I'll be happy to send you a link to Valley Isle Pumping, and you can read all about how to maintain and what they are and how they work for your wastewater disposal. I should qualify that by 2050, the cesspool will have to be converted to a septic system, right? So, you know, it's a ways out, but just so you know, that's coming. Mold disclosure. Well, first of all, you know, we on Maui, we are used to an approximate 65–70% humidity at any given time. So we have mold. It's just kind of life here. However, if there is water penetration anywhere in the house and we see that, or we discover it through our home inspection, you might want to have a mold test done. This usually happens, you know, under the kitchen sink. There's a leak once or twice, and we look under there and it's all dark. That's going to tell us there's mold there, and we might want to hire, or you might want to hire a mold inspection for that purpose. Sex offenders, we don't need to talk about that. It's, if you're interested, you need to go to websites or go to the police department. I have no obligation to make any disclosures, nor does the seller. Flood zone. So I have already printed out the flood zone designation for this property, and it's in an X flood zone, which means it doesn't get a lot of flooding, if any. So, and we can see we're on a pretty flat piece of land. We know where the gulches are nearby, etc. So, and how the water flows down the street. Lead-based paint. So again, lead-based paint would be applicable to disclose to you the use of lead-based paint. If this were built before 1978, it is not. So we don't need to go there. And to remove the stuff, next item is really a big deal. Like they tent the house and hazmat suits and all of that. Climate change and natural hazards, just to kind of, we like to let everybody know, we do have a lot of weather on Maui. So we get hurricanes, and most importantly, most of the damage that happens on Maui does not happen during hurricanes, but plain old windstorms. We usually have one big windstorm of winter, at least one, and trees go down and there's suddenly a lot of rain and it comes down at some odd location on the mountain. And we do, you see all those runoff canals here, right? Like sometimes they are needed, and we're very grateful for them. So we have a lot of weather here. We also have invasive species. So the invasive species are things like, we are now plagued with koki frogs in the Haiku area. So they're moving ever eastward. And, if you drive through Maliko Gulch, you'll be able to hear them. But we do have them. We also have little red fire ants at this point, and they are expanding slowly but surely. We have a great company called MISC, the Maui Invasive Species Committee. And they employ a bunch of really, really dedicated people who go out and contain any kind of, like they're containing the koki frogs as best they can. They go to any property that says they have red fire ants. So pretty awesome. And finally, at the bottom of page 7, wired funds. Yeah, this is really an important item. I just want to make sure you understand you're going to get instructions from escrow on how to access the wire transfer account to wire your funds to. You will not get an email from me or anyone else changing that instruction. There will be no change to that instruction. So if you were to get an email suddenly that says, oh, we're changing the account to which you should wire your money, you do not do anything. You call your escrow officer immediately, please. Even though it looks like it came from the escrow company, or it looks like it came from me, it did not. So we are having wire fraud, and we just need to make you aware of that. All right. That takes us to the top of page 8. Our most important paragraph, or most important for you, is the J1 general inspection of the property contingency. And I'm just going to read this to you. At buyer's sole cost and expense, buyer shall have the right to personally or by an expert, professional, or other representative of buyer's choice, A, inspect the property or any portion thereof, B, inspect all major appliances and fixtures, C, inspect all public records relating to the property and its use, and D, review all matters concerning the property, including those described that we just went through, right? All the mold and blah, 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 all that. Yeah. The obligation of buyer to purchase the property is contingent upon buyer's approval of inspections and review of all matters described in paragraph I-6, what we just all went through, within 14 days. So you're going to get 14 days. And we are going to be able to hire a home inspector and have that done in time. And then I just want to point out here at the bottom of this paragraph in bold, it says if buyer fails to make an election in writing to terminate this purchase contract within the specified time period, then buyer will have waived this contingency. In other words, we cannot let this date expire without making a decision, right? So if you need more time to make a decision, we can ask the seller for more time, but we need to make sure to honor these dates. Okay. Any questions there?
Yes. if, this one is a countered 7 days, when you.
If you receive a counter for
Counter
7
7
days on
days.
this transaction,
Yeah,
on
and-
this offer,
And the report said kind of the little bit major a problem. On
you mean
that.
you've received the seller's disclosure?
No,
or-
no, the report.
Oh, you see, I see. So you're in contract,
Mhm.
you have 7 days here and you've already had a home inspection
Mhm.
and the home inspection says there's major issues.
Yeah, well, not major, but kind of medium major.
Okay.
And it's as is condition,
uh-huh.
but can you extend this period?
You can ask to extend the period. Yes, absolutely. And usually, I mean, often the sellers will agree to a few days extension. You can also, at this point, negotiate, right? So you can bring up this, you can also, if the issue is big enough, medium sounds big enough, you would now exercise the seller's disclosure amended disclosure statement because the buyer has discovered new information that wasn't disclosed before.
Right.
And that suddenly buys you 15 days.
Oh,
So you would now, let's say you're 5 days into your inspection period, right? You get the report, you find out all this bad stuff. We would now file an amendment to the disclosure statement and exercise that 15 days as per I3, four, thank you. I4. As per I4, yeah. So does that make sense? Because this is a critical use of I4, right? Is when that report is received, we now get this extra time.
Marion, one more question in regards to this. So after we've had the inspection and we have a list of 8 or 9 things that we're asking the seller to correct without, just basic things that just need to be minor repairs. Does that mean that they're signing off on the J1 at that point?
Okay, so if you use our forms in office forms, you
Right,
will
exactly.
see that there is a checkbox that says seller agrees to make these repairs, and you have to check box number 4, which says we will accept J1 if the seller agrees to this and does this, right? Now, oftentimes there's a little back and forth, right? The seller says, well, I'll do 3 of those, not all 5, or whatever. So you might have a little back and forth, but yes, you want to be sure that you use the form that says the buyer, with the seller's signature and concurrence to make these repairs, buyer hereby accepts the J1 inspection period and waives that contingency. Okay, and our form should facilitate that. Yeah. All right.
Marion?
Yeah.
It's Lee. Hi. Hey, I just wanted, since you brought up the idea of extending J1, I just wanted to emphasize that has to be by mutual agreement. We have no right to just unilaterally extend that. The other thing, because I hear this from time to time from agents and brokers, if you're in negotiation on an item, but there has been no agreement and your contingency expires, your buyer just waived J1.
Does
So I
everybody
just wanted
understand
to
that?
really emphasize those things.
Those are awesome. Thank you so much, Lee. So the first one is the unilateral extension is for closing, not for J1. Okay, the unilateral right to extend, let me say it again, is for closing only. If you need to extend J1 because your buyer needs a little more time, you need to write a contingency extension. You can do that using the contingency extension form from MyKW from the office forms folder, or you can just write an amendment. Either one would be good. And the second thing is, be careful that as your client is thinking about or negotiating repairs with the seller as part of the J1 period, don't let J1 expire. If you have no signature from both parties that the seller has agreed to these repairs, as Lee said, your contingency will be waived in the middle of your negotiations. Okay, so this is our job to make sure these things, that's what I'm going to do for you, Pamela Purchase. I'm going to make sure that we don't go past these deadlines. Absolutely. Thank you. All right, next we've got J3 is the property condition maintenance and final walkthrough. We're going to schedule a final walkthrough 5 days before closing. And because then you'll have seen the property, then we'll go and sign your papers, and you'll feel comfortable to transfer your money into escrow, right? And then we need that 3 days to close that I explained to you. The seller is obligated to keep the property in the condition that we find it at the time of the inspection. So, you know, they should have the lawn done one more time before closing, and the property should be cleaned and empty and vacant if we are asking for the units that we're asking to be vacant. And if there are any kind of repairs that the seller agreed to make in J4, what it says, if the seller, if you get to the final walkthrough and the seller didn't make those repairs, or the seller didn't clean the property really well, right? Like the windows are dirty or the screens are dirty or something, then the parties all agree to retain about 150% of the estimated cost of those repairs or cleaning, whatever needs to be done, to retain that in escrow. And what we're saying here is that the seller has until closing date to fix those problems. After closing, that money gets paid out to the buyer, right? Because this is like, we're not messing around here. We're not giving you an extra 3 days after closing to make repairs. Like the sellers had lots of time. So that's what paragraph J4 says. J5 just says there's no continuing warranties, right? This, remember, everything that the seller does does not come with warranty or the information provided here. Yeah. However, there is such a thing as a home warranty. I don't know if you've ever heard of this. A home warranty is an insurance policy on your appliances, basically. So if you have concern about the appliances, because, you know, in the cottage, that refrigerator is probably 10 or 12 years old, right? So if you want a home warranty, let me know and I'll put you in touch with the people. It's usually around $350, $400 a house. You've got 2 units here, so I'm not sure what it would be, but we could look into it if you're interested. J7 says we're asking for any existing plans or warranties. Well, there probably aren't any warranties. We don't see any new appliances, but he did have the roof redone 5 years ago. So maybe there's a warranty on the roof. We'll see about that. And then you know what this means is you're going to get that kitchen drawer full of the, you know, all the instruction manuals and everything. You're going to get all of that, right? So we'll make sure you get that. And if he has house plans, the architectural plans for the house, that's what this is asking for also. We're asking the seller to remove all personal items from the property 6 days prior so that we can come on the 5th day prior to closing the next morning. We're also asking the seller to clean the property by the end of 6 days before closing. Just so you know, they're asked to clean everything, and only the carpet needs to be professionally shampooed. Everything else can be done by the sellers. Now, we talked about this, and you feel the sellers are very neat, clean people, so it's okay to let them do the cleaning. If they were not such neat, clean people, we would ask for professional cleaning. So anyway, all right. Pet treatment, we don't need to check that because we didn't see a pet. Did you see a pet? Did you see a pet? Anybody see a pet? Anybody see a cat walk around there? Okay. I just want to say, if we see a pet, we ask for pet treatment, right? Pet equals pet treatment. Where there's a pet, there are fleas. So, okay. All right, the next section is about staking and survey. We are not asking for staking only, we are asking for a full survey. And we're asking for that to be done 30 days, which is right at the same time as conditional loan approval. So, you know, both parties have to deliver something at 30 days. And a survey, just so you understand, is the staking and a map of the property. That's what you're going to get. So when we find out that the staking is done, I'm gonna call you and we're gonna go over there right away because the Menehune in Hawaii take up stakes. And by the time we get to closing, half of the stakes may be gone. So we're gonna do it right away. We're gonna look at them. And I even have some extra orange tape and we can tie it to tree branches and stuff and make sure that you know where your boundary pins are. And I call them pins because they're little pieces of pipe literally driven into the ground, and the surveyors find them with metal detectors, right? That's how they find them. They get GPS coordinates and then they go around and find these pipes in the ground. Okay, if there is an encroachment and we know the shed in the back, that's a little questionable, right? And that whole fence area, there's something there that could be an encroachment. So you get to decide what you want to have done. If you want to have that encroachment removed, like they have to move the fence or take down the shed, move the shed, whatever, or do you want to ask the seller to get an encroachment agreement with the neighbor? And then the listing agent and the seller would have to approach the neighbor. A document would be prepared by escrow's attorneys, and you get to review that document and agree to it. And then that would be signed and recorded with the sale. So this is, we don't need to worry about this now. If it comes up, we'll worry about it. All right. Next is termites. So we are asking that we name the termite company to do a termite inspection. Termite inspections are good for 15 days. So the termite company comes out, does an inspection, and the next day we and escrow get a report that says, did they find any evidence of live termite infestation? And if they do, the seller is responsible for remediating that termite infestation. Usually it means the house needs tenting. Sometimes it means the spot treatment is sufficient because it's just in one spot, you know, everything else is clean. And you might agree to that. So this paragraph makes the seller responsible for that. This paragraph also says the seller will pay for the termite inspection. So we will get that 14 days prior to closing. All right, so page 10, we're at the mandatory provision of documents. This neighborhood doesn't really have an association that I'm aware of, but just in case, we ask for it anyway. And they can tell us during escrow that there are no documents. If there are, you will probably find some old documents. Okay, I just froze, but you can still hear me. There we go. You can find old documents on the title report. So we may find things on the title report. But we're going to ask for documents anyway, just to kind of cover our bases. Yeah. Okay. Are we? Can you guys all still hear me? Yes. Okay, good.
Yes.
Thank you. All right. So if there are documents, we're going to get them after 7 days or within 7 days, we acknowledge receipt and then you get 10 days to review them, but only if there are documents. All right, that takes us to the top of page 11, rental matters. So this is a little different here. We've got delivery of possession of the property free of tenants and rental documents both checked. And I've got a note in the line under N2 that says documents for Ohana tenant to be provided. Main house to be conveyed vacant, right? So kind of both apply. One house is vacant and one house comes with a tenant. So we're asking for 7 days to review the tenant's lease to be provided to us after 7 days, and then you'll have 7 days to review that lease. Right? You want to keep that tenant in the Ohana, right? That's what we agreed to. Yeah. Okay. All right, so the next section is about terminating this contract. And we referred to it a couple of times, but here it is kind of spelled out. So if you ever want to check, like, what are my rights here? How can I get out of this? This is the area, section O, that dictates how you can cancel this contract. So the first one, termination provision due to default, is where we do not want to be. So basically this says that if the in the event the the buyer is in default for failure to perform buyer's obligations under this purchase contract and the seller is not in default, then the seller may terminate this purchase contract and bring an action for damages for breach of contract. B, retain the initial earnest money deposit and all additional deposits. However, if the buyer has performed the obligation prior to seller delivering written notice of this termination, then we're safe. So it gives you a little bit of a cushion if we notice that we're late on something, but not a lot. So this is where I, as a realtor, I do not ever want to go here. So I'm going to make sure I bug you well enough in advance about anything that something is due. And if we need to extend, I'm going to recommend we extend. I take these deadlines really seriously because I do not want you to jeopardize your earnest money deposit. Termination provision 02 says, well, if you terminate within the time frame, you get your money back. There's not even questions asked. You don't even need to, no additional signatures are required. Escrow gets a termination notification like your J1. You say, I don't like the condition of the house. There are too many repairs needed. I don't want to buy this anymore. That's okay. You can cancel and get your money back. And then termination provision 03 says, for those paragraphs that use this is what I mentioned about the seller's right to cancel if you're late with your conditional loan approval or something. Well, you have some of those rights too, where you get a few extra days. And I would point out to you that you can cancel and you get a few extra days to consider that. They're kind of smattered throughout the contract. Suffice it to say that I'm really aware of our contingency deadlines. I keep tight track of them and we'll always be in touch and in communication about those so that we don't ever go into needing to default or risk default. Questions? Okay. 04 says mediation, that the buyer and seller, what is the word they're using here? And agree in good faith to attempt to settle any dispute, claim by non-binding mediation. So it is a good faith attempt that you're saying you will make here. In other words, you are not required by this contract to use mediation, but we highly encourage it. And our Realtors Association provides free mediation. So that's part of what we do here. All right. Arbitration, same thing. If you can't come to terms with any of the parties that you have a dispute with, then arbitration is recommended, but it's not required. Third-party claims, well, it just says, only the two parties are part of the contract. So third-party claims do not apply to this contract. Choice of law, the state of Hawaii laws shall apply. Attorney's fees, if you need to hire an attorney, obviously that would be at your expense, as is with any of the inspectors or services that you want to hire along the way. And then this next section is about foreign and non-resident buyer or seller. I just want to make you aware, you're coming from California. If you were to sell this property and move back to California, the state of Hawaii would withhold 7.25% of your proceeds to make sure you file taxes and get your refund for those. So just be aware that that law exists here, as does a federal law if you were to move to Canada or France, right? So the feds also say, no, you can't leave here and make a big profit on your house and not pay us taxes, right? That's basically what this is about. Okay. Finally, I've got some special terms here. The seller agrees to locate the cesspool in the septic system and uncover or dig up the access so that the buyer may have system inspected. I pulled that right out of the clause editor. There's a side note, not speaking to Pamela Purchase right now. So if you're not familiar with the clause editor, get familiar with the clause editor. It's awesome. This sentence is right in there. Here's another one. Title insurance to be expanded coverage policy. Buyer to pay for expanded coverage portion. I always recommend to my buyers that they buy an Alta policy. It costs 10% more than the other policy, the regular one. I send them a chart of what the difference is between the coverage so that they can think about that. and they agree to take on that additional expense. The list is about this long of additional coverage. So take a look at that. Ask your favorite escrow officer for a chart to show you what the difference is. So there we go. Okay. Scope of service disclaimer by brokerage firms. So, you know, we're not responsible for anything. but basically what we're saying here is buyer and seller understand that brokerage firms have not made any representations or warranties and have not rendered any opinions about the legal or tax consequence of this transaction, the legality, validity, correctness, status, existence, or lack of any building permits. Like, I've done my best to provide you with that information, but if you really need to go see the buildings department to get this clarified and to know where to go next. And I've given you the names of consultant that you can speak to, right? So yeah, the land area of the property, the location of the boundaries, or the size of any improvements, right? I'm not the surveyor, but we've gone through all that. So it's a disclaimer. Okay. Rental property, I'm also not promising any future rent values, right? We've looked at historical rents, and the rest is for us to all.
Hello.
Yes. No. Okay. Future resale value, again, I don't have a crystal ball and I haven't promised any future value on the property. Obligations, the brokerage firm shall not be held liable if either the buyer, you, or the seller do not perform, right? I can't speak for the seller, and I hope you do. Okay. Permissions, the party grants the brokerage firm, oh yeah, you have permission to publish things on the MLS. The sales price is going to be published, right? And your ownership of the property will be public record, just, you know, making you aware of that. If anybody in this transaction has a real estate license, we're obligated to disclose that. The acceptance date is the date that the last party signs the contract, right? That last signature that then makes the contract go active. That will be the acceptance date, and all the dates get calculated from there. Dates and times are Hawaii time. So just so you understand, a contingency expires at 11:59 p.m. on the day that it expires, technically. Okay. Hawaii time. Yes. So we just do things get down to the wire sometimes? Yes, they do. We don't like it, but sometimes they do, right? Yeah. And this contract is written as time is of the essence, right? Yeah, I think I've made that point to you. Timing is very important. So yes, this is a time is of the essence contract. The dates and times for deliverables are meant to be adhered to. The seller agrees to follow fair housing laws. I certainly am aware of fair housing laws, and so we're all aware of that. Electronic signatures are acceptable. Counterparts, that means if the seller were to sign this piece of paper and you were to sign this piece of paper, but it's the same, it says the same thing, that's counterparts, they would consider that signed. And this constitutes the complete agreement. So if we were to add an addendum to this, we would need to amend the contract if there were anything, like if the seller comes to us with that or anything like this. But this document is the complete agreement. And there you are. And that's it. Questions? Wow. Okay, you're easy. No questions from the gallery.
I got one, if that's okay.
Yes, yes.
Okay, this is Steve. Back to what Lee was saying, can you give a couple scenarios, or can I give you scenarios and make sure I understand of how it can be used on either side if nobody signs anything by the J1 period?
Okay, go.
Like for instance, you just have two agents who completely weren't paying attention and it goes the day after the J1. If the buyer says, forget it, we want to buy another house, they can get out of it. If the seller says, forget it, we don't want to sell, we want to live here, they can get out of it as well if nobody signs it.
No, you misunderstood.
Okay.
Contingency very clearly says, what page are we on? J1's page 7. No. Page 8. Page 8. At the bottom of the J1 paragraph, it says, if buyer fails to make an election in writing to terminate this purchase contract within the specified time period, then buyer will have waived this contingency. The contingency no longer exists.
Okay, so it's just the buyer side. Okay.
The
So,
seller, just to be clear here, the seller has no out in our contract. The only out a seller has is if the buyer does not perform or goes into default. But if the buyer, for instance, like I said, doesn't provide the conditional loan approval on time, right? And the seller wants out, the seller can use that next day and cancel the contract.
I have a question.
Yeah.
You know, on the question of does the seller have the right to cancel? There is one case, right, which is the review of the buyer's, proof of funds. Right?
Yes, which we're usually giving people, within the first 5 days. Yeah,
Right.
that is true.
Right. But
That
people always say there's no right to cancel, but there actually is one.
There is a right to, you're absolutely right. I take it back. This is a good one.
I had to
They're all
correct you.
inspection
I had to
agents.
correct you one time. At least.
Ah, good. But has that happened? Yes, it has, right?
Yeah,
Yes,
I know it happens. Yeah.
yeah. Sellers all of a sudden go like, oh, I should sell for
can I ask another question?
Yeah.
This might not be with the contract related. I mean, it's related to contract, but any of you out there have hacks on how to remember all the appliances and inclusions? Say you look at 3 places in one day, you get back, 2 days go by, they say, let's put an offer for that so-and-so street. How do you guys remember all the stuff in there, or just look at what's on the MLS basically?
So
Take pictures.
Yeah,
the
take
inclusions
pictures.
are on the MLS. I have seen too many listings recently where the inclusions are not included. And I have asked Paragon to fix the reason. The reason is the little link is so hidden as to where that list of inclusion is for people to input. They forget to input their inclusions. Our instructions to you are to call your listing agent before you write an offer. There is a document in the office forms called What to Do Before You Write an Offer. We urge you, I use it because I don't want to have to remember everything that I'm supposed to do before I write an offer. So if you think you don't need a checklist as to what to do before you write an offer, you do. I hate to tell you this, you do. And it's right there for you. And it says you must call the listing agent. You must call the listing agent, and checking on inclusions is one of the points, right? What else? Is there anything else that the seller is willing to make repairs, or anything that's excluded? What do I need to know, right? So it asks a whole bunch of questions, including how many showings have you had? Do you have any other offers? All of that. Check that list out. You need to have it handy for yourselves. Good question.
Can I ask a
I
question?
have a question. Can you put in there an attorney review similar to J1, or the proof of funds that the seller's attorney has to review the contract, and if they don't like it, they can have an out?
Yeah, that exists. You can do that, that the sale of the property is contingent upon buyer's attorney's review, and to be provided within 7 days. And the attorney is given 7 days. We don't recommend it, but yeah, you can do that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Can I ask you a question real quick? Hi, this is Julie. Going back to the clause editor, I actually did just help co-list on this listing where we had to pay for the inspection of the sewer, the septic, and it ended up costing us like $1,200 for them to dig out the front of it, and that was a mess. So there's a way to actually take that out of a contract so that you are not stuck like that again, just by saying if that is a seller thing to do that, or is it a buyer thing to do that? Because
So this was a purchase contract. So in this purchase contract, this buyer was asking for the cesspool and septic systems to be uncovered. So now they don't need to be uncovered. They just need the access, right? The access hole. Just find me that. So if you just went through that, I hope you advised your buyer or whatever to put a big rock there or something to mark the spot so that 5 years from now where this access hole is, right? I've just
Yeah.
gone through this myself. But could a seller counter this offer and take that paragraph out? Of course they can.
Oh, okay, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. okay,
So
'cause
you
that-
could,
Because
yeah,
we found out through this that the septic needs to be cleaned out every 5 years. And so the buyer said, we want it cleaned out. And the seller said, that's ridiculous. And so it's, we kind of like had to fight over that a little bit. So I just wanted to see if there was a way to say, take that out, but you have to be the buyer to take that out, obviously not the seller.
you want no.
So the clause editor, that's for the buyer's contract, not so.
Yes, the buyer is asking for it in this purchase contract. If the seller doesn't want to provide that service, the seller would have to counter and take out paragraph 1 of section Q.
Okay.
But let me just explain to you, there is no hard, fast rule that septic systems must be cleaned out in 5 years. There is all sorts of different ways that cesspools and septic systems are managed. And it depends on the seller, right? Depends on the individual, what you do to your septic system and how often it needs to be pumped. So.
Well, and also you guys could do a class on what happens when the inspector scares the hell out of your buyers with a bunch of stuff. So.
So here's my advice on that. You're going to hire a home inspector, Pamela, and that home inspector is going to tell you that this screw is loose and this is loose and this is bad and I found a wire up in the attic and I found this and I found that. And he's going to, because he needs to earn his money. Yeah. He needs to make sure he gives you a full list. So one of the things we're going to do is we're not going to nickel and dime the seller, right? For these little pitty things, which chances are, if I come to visit you 5 years from now, you will not have fixed, right? So we are only going to be concerned about important things, like major issues, okay? And just keep in mind, you are going to get a list of 37 things that the home inspector found wrong, but it's up to us to go like, well, really only 5 of them are critical to us. And so let's ask for a credit, or let's ask for repairs, right? Either way.
Well, in both situations, I've had the buyer and the seller say, I want everything fixed, every single thing. And so I'm glad I was with a woman who has a little more experience than I was, because I was like, oh my gosh, we got to pay for all this. And she said, no. So we had to go back and forth, but that was a big learning lesson. The old inspection report and how anal the sellers and the buyers want to be in terms of getting those fixed. So
I'm going to go back to my advice about an as-is addendum. This is what you need to pay attention to. The as-is addendum you want to add is one that has at the bottom where it says special terms, you write into it. Buyer agrees to make any repairs up to $2,000 or $1,000 or whatever number seems appropriate for the house and the price you're paying. And that is putting the seller on notice that you're not going to nickel and dime them for all the Menini stuff, but you will be getting in touch if there are larger repairs that are needed.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
It's a way to address that. Here's the second thing. On an as-is addendum, it is our job to make sure we convey to our buyers what that means. And no, I'm not going to go back and ask for every repair because we have an as-is addendum. If you want to be able to go back and ask for every repair, let's not put in an as-is addendum. We need to enforce that. That's up to us, right? To just let buyers just do what they want. Now, as-is addenda will become meaningless, and we can't have that. So in order to make sure they mean something, we need to convey that. And so I do that by qualifying and having my buyer agree, yeah, okay, well, we'll do the little repairs up to that much. But if the roof leaks and there's a roof repair for $12,000, no, they're going to negotiate, right? Okay. Anything else on the purchase contract?
In that case, so you negotiate with the seller
Yes.
and the seller said, oh no.
Yeah, seller has an absolute right, right? There's nothing in the contract that says the seller must give a credit or negotiate.
Right.
Absolutely. So can the seller say no? Yeah.
That's it.
That's it. Well, you can try. You can go, okay, if you won't pay the full roof repair of $12,000, will you pay, $7,500 or will you pay $8,000? No, I will not. Will you split it with me? and give me $6,000. Like wear them down. Don't just, it's a negotiation, right? So, yeah. Other questions? All right, I'm giving everybody 5 minutes, 7 minutes. What time is it? 5 minutes. We've got 5 to noon. And then we're gonna go over the listing contract. So get a fresh cup of coffee or some water and walk around and come back in 5 minutes at noon. Oh. Was it? Oh my God. Where did we go? 4 live music.
Oh, really? Isn't it funny, like post-COVID, we're like, oh my God, I would like have a life.
Hey, Jen, perfect timing.
All the movies.
Are you on this Zoom call? Oh.
Yeah, this is it.
Oh. Oh my.
Ziggy Marley, I went to see my girlfriend that I go to visit in
Have you ever worked with Eris?
at 3 live gigs. So that's why I went. And one of them was a Patsy Cline tribute.
Oh, wow.
God, it was so phenomenal. So I'm old, I love Patsy Cline, right?
Yeah, we can all love Patsy Cline, Spider.
So here, yeah, all the live, yeah. It's,
I'm thinking of going to New Zealand to listen to this, like, DJ. Yeah, he's playing in, LA in October, but my closing is like right in that kind of time period, and it's like, I just can feel in my body that if I book it, it's gonna get extended.
Yep.
So I'm like, okay, and so I was like looking the other day and I was like, I was like, I should just plan for that.
they said cold early. Yeah, let's close early, yeah.
You're hot. Yes, you are, Marion.
That'll make it cold. Okay, what? You put it back up if you get too cold. Okay. Is everybody on break? Yeah, it's just give you a couple minutes. So how often do you come in here? Once a month. No, okay, I'm not seeing it from that. Yeah.
Nice. I'm coming to your office. I gotta go.
We turn the air up a little, or the air down a little bit, whatever you call it. It's so hot.
Oh, you're hot.
No, we did.
Oh, you did.
Oh, it's over there?
There's 3.
Yeah, so we turned that one down.
Okay.
So if you want to turn this one down, just 1 degree, that would be great. I know the systems work intensely here.
Yeah.
How you were so cold.
I cannot wait. Life, it is, no. Yeah, how are you? Yeah. But I'm checking in on you. Yeah, you're gonna take it. I'm going to. How is your, you're going into another job.
Marion, yes. Yes, you're gonna get it on Fridays. You know how we send out Friday. E-blasts with all sorts of information. It'll be on there.
Or the YouTube channel.
Or the youth, it'll be in the YouTube channel.
Yeah, like 24 to 48 hours after the class.
Okay, perfect. I might just like do this. Remote. All right, it's noon. Calling all agents, calling all agents. I started again. So I just wanted to say, before we go on to the listing contract, this usually takes me about an hour. Took me a little longer here because I went into a little more detail than I might ordinarily, but it's at least an hour conversation. I've had it take as long as 2 hours when people really want to ask a lot of questions. And you know what? It's so worth it because then they're really into it. They really get it. And yeah, so it's worthwhile exercise. On this listing contract, I'm going to take you through what you probably don't do or haven't ever done before, which is use this listing contract to talk to people. So with that, we are going to speak with Sam Seller and Sally Seller, our sellers for this exercise here. All right. So this would be
Discussing is Paris Sterling.
Bill, mute yourself. We can
Okay,
hear you.
all right.
somebody's got their volume on or their speaker on or their mic on and then you want to mute yourself. Thank you. Okay, so you might do this right at the end of a listing presentation, right? You've got it filled out at the end of your listing presentation and you now want to just take your sellers quickly through it. Certainly if they're like, are we ready to sign? And they say, yeah, we want to list with you. Great. Let's just go through this contract, right? You wouldn't do this if somebody isn't quite ready to sign yet. So that's where we're at with our sellers, Sam and Sally. All right. So here's the property. I just want to point out again that the brokerage firm is a member of the National Association of Realtors, and we abide by a code of ethics. I think I mentioned that to you already, and it's just really important to me to share that with you, that we, have a professional standards officer here on Maui, and we take this very seriously. So, and for that reason, this contract, here's the address and your tax number, and you are hiring Keller Williams and me as your agent. And here is your names. And now it goes right up front into agency. And the reason it talks about agency right up front is because that's what you're doing. You are hiring us to be your agent, right? This is really an employment contract, if you will. So I just want to read you again what it says here about the brokerage firm's obligations to the seller. The brokerage firm represents the seller only, and the seller's agent owes the highest duties to the seller, including confidentiality, loyalty, due care, and diligence. So I just love that. I love that it's right here in the contract. And like I said, we've gone over it. So any questions there? All right, so right here, it asks about dual agency. We had a conversation already about dual agency, and I've reviewed with you, and we have agreed that you are okay with dual agency as long as I don't do it. Is that correct? Yeah, that's your recollection too? Okay, well, I've got that noted here, but you are in agreement with dual agency, so I have that checked. Okay. So I'm just going to take you through this because I'm obligated to kind of ask these questions and make sure about these things. So about ownership and title and authority, I just want to make sure that you're the owner of the property. Yeah, and only you are named on title of this property. Is that correct? Okay. And that you have the authority to execute this listing contract and sell the property. Yes, it's not in trust or anything like that, right? and that you are not a party to any other listing contract or commission agreement to sell the property. Is that correct? Yeah. Okay, cool. Thanks. So I want to point out to you that this is called the exclusive right to sell listing agreement. And that means that the seller shall list the property with the brokerage firm only, and that the brokerage firm is entitled to a commission if the property is sold by the brokerage firm or the seller. In other words, you're going to hire me to handle this whole transaction. And if a friend of yours comes along and says, oh, I want to buy your property, it's still, we've got a commission agreement. I'm still going to handle that sale for you and take you through the entire process. So that's what exclusive right to sell listing contract means. Seller hereby employs the brokerage firm as the seller's agent and grants the brokerage firm the exclusive and irrevocable right to sell or exchange the property identified. Okay, so just wanted to. All right, we agreed to a list price of $1,279,000. Are you still okay with that list price? Yeah, okay, good. All right, and our listing period. So, you know, we talked about this. We did a little research, what the market is doing and how fast things are moving. Things are slowing down a little bit. So I've written the listing period for 9 months here. So starting September 21, and, you know, in a week's time, giving you a little time to do those things that you were going to do. And it gives me time to bring the photographer in, all of that. Right. So, and then it'll go until June 20th in 2023. So that would give us 9 months. So here is the termination clauses for this contract. Either party may end this listing contract within 7 calendar days, advanced written notice to the other, except for the first 3 months. In the first 3 months, or until December 31st, 3 months and 10 days, I ask that you allow us to have mutual consent to cancellation. So the reason I ask for that is the first few months are the most busy for me. It's where I put out the most energy and cost and expense. And I'd really appreciate the opportunity to sell the property for you. Now, let me clarify for you. I understand that if you change your mind or if something comes up and you need to cancel the listing, I'm not here to stand in the way of you canceling the listing. I guess the thing I'm really asking for is if at any time, this is a request of you, if at any time you feel like you're not fully satisfied with my service, like a way to put this is, if you can't give me a 5-star rating, and I know that's presumptuous, but if you can't do that, I would really like to know. Because I would like to fix whatever is concerning you. I don't want you to have reservations about my performance or my activities on your behalf. So will you agree that to let me know if you can't, if you're not totally happy? Would you do that? Would you make that agreement with me? Thank you. I really appreciate that, because I promise I can take it. I won't defend. It's not about me being defensive. I just need to hear your feedback. So that would give us time to have a conversation, right? So thank you so much. Okay. Items included or excluded. This is just to clarify that all of your appliances, all those things are quote unquote attached to the property. Obviously, your bookshelves, right, are going to be attached to the property, but you're also selling your appliances, right? That's so they are included here. The compensation to the brokerage firm is 6%. That's the commission we charge, plus general excise tax on that commission, right? Just collecting the taxes. Yeah, I just got to pass them on to the GET office here. So that's set. Now, let me just explain this next section. And it says when those commissions are due. So the first item says an A7A, the brokerage firm, seller, cooperating broker, or any other person procures a buyer or buyers who offer to purchase the property on the price and terms of this listing contract or on any price and terms acceptable to the seller during the listing period or an extension, no matter who procures the buyer, right? Just back to that point. This Subsequent paragraphs here talk about the fact that you are actually obligated to pay a commission if you were to receive an offer that's acceptable, that's at full price and acceptable to your terms, but you opted not to take it. Or if you were to accept an offer and subsequently default on that offer, right? Or default on that contract. All those really obligate you to pay a commission to Keller Williams. That's what these paragraphs are about. They also talk about the fact that there is something called the protection period. And if someone from my protection period were to purchase the property, and I'm going to explain that to you next, then you would owe a commission to Keller Williams. And finally, if you were to give an option, right? We don't do options here, but if you were to give an option. So now I just want to say that I'm here to work with you. If you find some reason why you don't want to accept an offer and you want to keep marketing the property, I understand that. And I want to work with you on that, but I just want to be clear that the contract says that. And hopefully you don't do that more than once, right? Hopefully, if you don't accept one offer, but we can move on to another buyer and you can then sell your property. Okay. All right. The next paragraph talks about compensation to a cooperating broker, and that's the buyer's agent, right? So we cooperate with buyer's agents, and you agree here that I'm going to give 3% of that 6% commission plus the GET to the buyer's agent and the buyer's brokerage. So that's what this talks about. And just to be clear here, both the buyer's agent and we split our commissions with our companies, right? So what I end up with is a small percentage of that full commission. All right, so that takes me to this section called the protection period. So the protection period basically says that while I am listing your property, I'm going to make note of all the people who come to look at the property. And if you were to cancel this listing contract with me, if one of those buyers that I showed the property to comes back and chooses to buy the property, either from you directly or from another agent that you've hired as a new listing agent, you would, for 180 days, in that 180-day period, if a buyer that I showed the property to comes back and wants to buy, you would owe Keller Williams a commission, not your new listing agent. That's kind of how, like, I didn't make this up. This is the standard form, right? This is how real estate works. It's a little odd, but this is how real estate works. So I just want to make sure you understand that. Any questions on that? Okay. I am obligated to give you, if you were to cancel my contract and cancel this listing agreement, I would be obligated to give you a list of names of the people I showed the property to within 10 days of cancellation. If I were to give it to you on the 11th day, you would no longer have to honor it. So within 10 days, I'd have to give you that list. Which kind of begs the question, do you have a protection list? Like, have you listed the property before? Do you have a protection list to share with me? Right now, I would know that because I'd see in the MLS, but sometimes people have listings that aren't in the MLS, and there could be a protection list, right? So me asking for it is important so that I can deal with that, right? And now become aware that there is a protection list. All right, so just to clarify here, section 3 of this paragraph explains again, if you were going to go into escrow with a buyer that I showed the property to and close, you would owe Keller Williams that commission. All right. Additional terms between the seller and the brokerage firm. So first of all, just to be clear here, the general excise tax as referenced above as part of the commission shall be calculated at 4.166%. So you know how that is. We need to add that in so that when we do the math, it becomes 4%. You know, You get that, right? Okay. Number 2, seller agrees that the listing agent shall disclose to other agents the existence of an offer if one has been received. And I would like to talk about that for a moment. So people ask this all the time, right? Buyers, agents, and buyers want to know, have you received an offer? And we generally say yes to that if it's yes, or I'm expecting one, or no, I haven't received. And then the buyer's agent might ask me more questions. Like if I have received one, the buyer's agent might ask me, well, have you got a cash offer? Have you got an offer at full price? You know, lots of questions. So I would like to know from you and have this conversation. I would like to be able to answer, yes, I have a cash offer. Yes, I have a full price offer. If somebody says to me, do you have an offer over asking price? I can say yes. And when they ask me, well, how much over asking price? I will say, I'm not at liberty to say. If they ask me, have you got it at asking price? And I don't, I might say, I have very close to asking price. And they might say, well, how close? And I'll say, you know, it's really close. Okay, so the idea is my job is to get you the most money for your house. So I want to make sure any buyer coming in is motivated to give like a good offer to compete with what we've already got, right? So may I have your permission to do that? And I'm going to add that in here so we can also agree to that I can disclose, say yes to a cash offer question or at full price. And the
Marion,
third item, yeah.
this is Lee. I have a question about this particular clause. I thought this used to say seller agrees that listing agent may disclose. This says shall disclose. Did I just miss something there?
That's interesting. I would have to check. I thought I pulled a template. I thought this is the template. We'll have to double check what the template says. And let's.
You may be right.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. Good point. Okay, moving on then. Yeah.
The template says shall.
Pardon me?
The template does say shall. You wrote that.
Okay, okay. We'll have to talk about that at the next big meeting. See what we all think. Or do we want to reconsider that? Okay. The last item I have in here is just to acknowledge our dual agency agreement. So it says agent agrees not to represent a buyer. Agent may refer any prospective buyer to another KWRM agent and dual agency shall apply. Okay, that's not in yours. That is not in a template. That is the agreement I have with Pam. Oh, excuse me, who are you talking to? Sam and Sally. Sam and Sally don't feel comfortable with me doing dual agency. Right? They think they just feel that's a little too close for comfort. And so I don't have any issue with that. And so I'm just putting in writing here that you will, however, allow dual agency if Rosalina brings a buyer, or I can refer a buyer that I meet to another fellow agent and at Keller Williams. And so they do agree to dual agency, not just me doing it. I'm just wanting to point out that that little nuance is possible. And not the end of the world, because I'm going to ask for a referral fee to whoever I give it to, right? So I don't end up. Yeah, it's all good. All right, top of page 3, number A11, addenda made a part of this contract. Exhibit A is the MLS data input form. And that should be listed up there. And now here are, right, and we're going to go over that next. That's all the details about your house and your property that we're going to put into the multiple listing service. That's what that form is. So we'll go over that next. In any case, here are the brokerage firm's obligations to this contract. So we agree to make our best efforts. And that is such an odd term, but I just want to clarify that our job is that we agree to use the best efforts to achieve the sale of the listed property to a qualified buyer at a price and upon terms acceptable to the seller. So our best efforts mean what is, you know, these are technical or legal terms, right? And what does best efforts mean legally? It means what can be expected of a professional? What can you expect of a professional realtor to be their best effort? So marketing, for instance, we're going to place a for sale sign at the property and install a lockbox. Now, a lockbox, because you're still living in the house and you have a tenant, I would recommend that this is how I use lockboxes. I just put them on the hose bib so that I don't walk around with your keys. I don't want to walk around with you. I don't want to have them in my car, right? I like to have them there. And you can have the code to the lockbox, so you can access the keys. But the idea is that when I have a showing, I'm going to let you know. I'm going to ask you for that showing time, and I'm going to access the key, like in case you're gone that afternoon, at the lockbox at the hose bib, so that I can let myself in and show the property. The only time I'd use a lockbox is if it were vacant. The property were vacant. So if your tenant moves out or something, we can discuss this again, right? Okay. All right. Advertise the property for sale by way of the MLS, the internet, newspaper, not so much. But certainly social media and any other means that we're in compliance with county and state and federal laws. And seller acknowledges and understands and agrees that all photos and other means of advertisement generated by the brokerage firm will enter the public domain and may not be, it says will not be retractable, probably not be retractable. So that's the nature of the internet, right? So somebody might say, well, I don't like that. So what do we do about that? I said, well, what we can do is we can pull the data, we can pull the pictures off of the MLS. It's the MLS that feeds most of those other sites. And when the listing is sold, we can just leave a picture of the exterior and not have your personal items continue to be displayed there. I can't guarantee it because this listing is going to get distributed to some 370 sites all over the country, but I can certainly withdraw any pictures from the source of that data. All right, we're going to prepare information sheets. I love that. Flyers, promotional material, brochure about the property, right? Or landing page. I'm certainly going to do a landing page about the property. So all those things are part of what we'll do. And we're going to hold brokers opens. I'm going to have a nice brokers open for you. I need your cooperation to do open houses and any other special showings as brokerage firm deems appropriate. So we're going to set up events to bring in as many people as possible to see your property. And I'll schedule all of those with you, right? All right, the brokerage firm's obligations include communication. I assure you I will stay in touch. I'm going to contact you every time we have a showing. I'm also going to write you a report on the status of my efforts every Friday. You will hear from me in writing via email every Friday with a status report. So I make every effort to stay in touch with you. Negotiating, I'm going to be here to assist you with negotiations. The only time I can't do that is if it's dual agency, but I can certainly provide you all the comparables, let you know what recent sales there are, what's gone pending, or new listings that have come up. Just to remind you, this is an escrow state and escrow is going to be involved, and we agree to assist you and guide you to fulfill all of your obligations in a purchase contract through the escrow process, right? Once it's gone under contract, I'm here to facilitate that process with you. Also want to let you know that we are going to pay attention to fair housing laws. So how does this come up? You know, this could come up. Buyers often write love letters to a seller. And I don't have any problem with love letters, but I'm not going to forward one if there's a picture attached. It just makes it too blatantly a violation of fair housing laws. So that could come up. Now, my experience on fair housing is selling to Sam and Sally, who are an elderly couple, and they're moving back to be near their kids, and they're moving into a retirement community. and they've lived in this house for 30 years and they raised their children there and they love all their neighbors and they say to me, oh, Marion, we'd really like to, we talk to our neighbors and we'd like to sell to another elderly couple and who's going to blend in here and it'll, because we've all raised our children already and I've had to say, I'm sorry, I can't do that. Right? That would be a violation of fair housing laws. So that's the one time I've run into that in a listing. And finally, responsibility for disclosure. So the brokerage firm shall counsel, right, you on any kind of disclosure matters. The disclosure law, by the way, is written for sellers, not just realtors. It's written for the seller. Anybody selling real property in the state of Hawaii must disclose everything they know about that property. And I'll get more into that with you. All right, so how about seller's representation? So again, you are representing and advising me that there's no defaults, any notice of default or pending foreclosure action against the property? Anything like that? No? Okay. Any delinquent assessments due under any loan or other obligations such as taxes, AOAO, or homeowner dues, or associations, child support, or alimony payments, any late payments there. And the only reason I ask is because it puts the property under distress, right? So I would need to know that to notify potential buyers. That would get settled in escrow most likely, but we are obligated to disclose that. Any insolvency, filing for bankruptcy? No? Yeah, good. Okay. Litigation, is there any kind of arbitration or administrative action or government investigation into anything here? Is there any pending matter that pertains to this property? No. Okay. Special assessments. Has your neighborhood association assessed you for anything recently that you're still paying or that you are aware of that could be coming up? Okay, good. No. Regulatory violations, government violations of ordinances related to the property? No. Okay. Association violations, anything? No. Financial obligations that may exceed the proceeds of the sale. So according to your tax record, your mortgage on this property is about $650,000 or was when you took the property, when you took that mortgage. Do you have any additional liens on the property? No. Okay. All right. No additional liens or encumbrances. Or yes, you borrowed some money from your brother, and is that lien recorded? No, it's not. Okay. Well, we're going to have to notify escrow of that to be sure that that lien gets paid off as well, right? If it was against this property. So that might entail a conversation, obviously. All right, more seller's obligations. So you agree to cooperate and prepare the property, right? So we can show it and have open houses and all of that. You agree to provide access for open houses and showings, but also for the inspections, right? The buyer is going to want to have access to the property. So you agree to let us have access. Lockbox, we already talked about that, how we're going to do that. But here's an important one. We need you to secure your valuables, right? So right along with staging and talking about making the house look really pristine for buyers coming in, along with that is taking away your valuables. Let's just put them away. Don't leave your phone around. Don't leave computers or laptops around. Don't, just let's put all that away, including what's in your medicine cabinet. So please, it's just a precaution. I've never had anything happen with a listing, but we never know. So let's just not tempt fate. You just put it all in a box and slide it under your bed or in the back of the closet. Professional advice, seller's advice to consult an attorney, accountant, or other appropriate professionals, right? If you need be. And yes, I always advise you're going to have a significant income from this sale. So please speak with your accountant about the tax ramifications of that. Make sure you're aware. Offers, you agree to review all offers and you agree to sign and respond in writing to all offers. I know you don't want a lowball offer, and I know you wouldn't like to see that, but I need to ask you to at least reject it in writing. So even if you don't want the offer and you find it insulting, we need to acknowledge it in writing. And finally, disclosure of material facts. So this law 508D-15, back down at the bottom there, D7A, is written for sellers. And what this basically says is that you're obligated to disclose everything you know about the property. And my favorite story here is it's not just big things, it's also the repair history, right? So like, wouldn't you like to know when you're going to go buy something? Wouldn't you like to know if the kitchen faucet was replaced 2 years ago, or if the toilet, thing was replaced, or whatever? These are not major items, but they're the repair history, and the buyers would really like to know that. But there's also something like this. So here's my story here, in case you have anything like this. I have a seller, or had a seller, who had a section under her bedroom, it was like under the house portion, not basement, but under the house. And it was enclosed, and it got really moldy back there, and it was on the rainy side. And so she tore it all out and had it all rebuilt, and was so happy because it was all clean and she got rid of all the mold. And I asked her to please disclose that, because that's good news, right? She replaced it all, she repaired it. And she didn't want to. She said, why would I tell anybody and alarm them about mold when I've taken care of it? And I said, what guarantee do you have that the mold isn't going to come back into that same corner in your new materials? And if the seller finds out that you knew about this mold, that there was mold there before, 3 years from now, the buyers can come back and sue you for not telling them. So we don't want to go there. The whole point is to give a full disclosure of the property, okay, including all the good work you've done to remediate any kind of mold. So,
Marion, I have a question when you have a minute.
yeah.
This has gone back and forth several times over here on Big Island. And last we were told was, per Michelle, we did not need to do, and I'm not saying I agree with this, I'm just trying to get clarification. We did not need to do seller disclosures on vacant land. But looking at this listing agreement closer, it does specifically state that seller disclosures are required on vacant land,
Wow.
even though vacant land is not real property. Could we get some clarification on that?
Well, vacant land is real property, but my understanding is we do provide a seller's disclosure, because there's lots of information in the seller's disclosure that isn't related to a structure. It's related to, is there any chance of unexploded ordnance on this land? Has there ever been any erosion? Is this within the tsunami evacuation zone? Blah, 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 right? So there's a whole bunch of questions that pertain to the land, not necessarily a structure.
I agree. I fully agree with that. And the only reason that it had come up initially a few months back is that it is not a required document in command under vacant land. And that's kind of how the whole thing came up. I brought it up. And
oh, okay. So we need to talk to compliance about that. And it could be that in different parts of the country, it's handled differently, right?
We brought it up to compliance, and Michelle got brought into it, and Michelle was the one that made the decision that it is not required.
Okay,
So-
well, if Michelle said so, then Michelle would only do that if she checked the law. There is a seller's disclosure form. I would find it, I'm helping buyers buy land right now, and the seller agreed to provide a seller's disclosure. So you can ask for it, and but if Michelle says it's not required, then it's not required. I'm not going to question her, because she would
Right,
only
but the listing
check
agreement
the
says
law.
it does. So
Here she comes. She can answer that question.
What did I say?
The question is a seller's disclosure required for vacant land?
Yes, and it says it right on the document.
All right, so somewhere on the Big Island, they.
There was some confusion and we reclarified that in the last week or 10 days.
So
to the
it
broker.
is required.
Yes,
There you go.
heard my name being taken in vain, thought I'd come join you.
You heard it from the source right here. Okay. Oh, well, that was good. That was awesome, right? Get that clarified. Yeah, I like it.
I just add a little bit on that, Marion, because I know we all do a lot of land deals and there is issue with fire ants. And it is something that I think you'd want your buyer to know about. If there are fire ants on the property or not, or other kind of, vermin, so.
Vermin.
Well, I mean, isn't there mountain lions on Hawaii Island now? So who knows? So we're entering a whole nother ballgame here.
Yeah, so that.
I use it all the time on my land
Right,
listing,
for
for
sure.
sure.
Yeah.
Mountain
Yeah,
lion?
I agree. The invasive species portion for sure. I'm not even sure if it's, I can't recall if the seller's disclosure calls for a question on that. It asks about cockroaches and stuff like that, but does it ask about invasive species like coqui frogs and fire ants? I don't know. So we would want to be sure.
It does.
It does. Thank you. Thank you. See, we don't all know everything by heart. Eh? Cool. All right. So moving on from the seller's disclosure, like I said, I'm gonna review that document with you. We provide you a document to make those disclosures, make it easy for you. So I will provide that and take you through it. So I'll make it a little clarification for you to fill it out. All right. Leasehold, your property isn't leasehold. If it were, we'd have a disclosure there. Fair housing laws, again, you can see this kind of important being brought up again. Seller agrees to comply with all federal, state, and fair housing and anti-discrimination laws, right? Sex offenders, we have no obligation to research or do anything or disclose anything about sex offenders. So no need to pursue that in any way. The buyers will simply be advised if they want to know to contact the police department, or there are online websites. Prospects from prior listings. There it is. Yet again, this protection list. So when signing this listing contract, seller shall deliver to brokerage firm a copy of any valid prospect list. So meaning one that was delivered to you within 10 days of the cancellation of your last listing. So that might have been a month ago. Yeah. The seller might have kept the property off market for a month and then decided to relist a month later, and there was a protection list from a month ago. That would be a valid protection list. There would now only be 150 days left on it, but it would be valid. Mediation and arbitration. If any dispute comes up between parties, the parties are unable to resolve the dispute, seller agrees to attempt in good faith to settle such dispute or claim by non-binding mediation. And the seller will consider arbitration if mediation is not successful, right? So it doesn't bind you to this, but it highly recommends you consider mediation, which is provided by the Realtors Association. Escrow is a disinterested, neutral, I find that really, no, it's a neutral, right? Neutral third party that is selected by the seller and buyer upon acceptance of the purchase contract and to assist with the conveyance of the property. They're going to hold the money. They're going to make sure that the money doesn't transfer to you until the buyer is satisfied, and that your keys and your do not transfer to the buyer until you're satisfied. And when both parties agree, escrow can act and enforce the next steps. Costs. So again, what are some of the costs you can anticipate is the agreed upon commission that we've talked about. Customary closing costs, which could include title fees and escrow fees, conveyance, document prep, notary fees, etc. It also includes termite and survey matters. Now I highlight that, right? Does everybody know how to highlight in zip forms? It's very cool. You highlight that because it is in such small print and it is so critical. We have had numerous incidences where sellers have said, I'm not paying for a survey. I'm not paying for termite treatment. I'm not paying that, right? And it's because we don't review this. We don't let them know upfront, you're agreeing to this. And now the seller, like Sam and Sally, could say, we don't really think we should pay for a survey, so we don't really want to do that. Okay, I get to make a note in my listing contract right now under special terms and say, seller will not pay for survey. Right, and that way we've agreed, I know, I can put it in the realtor remarks, yeah.
I have a question, Marion, about that. This is Liza. So sometimes sellers think because they're saying, oh, I want it as is, I'm selling it as is, that they're not responsible for the termite inspection, the termiting and the termite inspection costs. So how do we address that?
So this is the point of bringing this up. If you do this in your listing presentation, as you review this in the contract, this will become the conversation. Right? And you address it now so that you know in advance, and you can say, well, how about if you got full price, would you be willing to pay for it? And then you could take it out. We can negotiate it in or out as you know, as seems appropriate. Or you absolutely do not want to pay for that. Okay, fine, I'll take it out. We'll put it in realtor remarks that you will not pay for termite inspection or treatment. Please mark, what is it, L2 as not applicable. Right? That's the whole idea, is that's why we're going over this. That's why we're learning to do this and use this document so that you are reminded to talk about all these little manini facts that then become a big issue during escrow. Yeah, that's what we're hoping to avoid. Any other questions on that?
I was just going to say, it's also going to come up in the purchase contract when it comes in. So if you didn't get it clear then, you should get it clear when you got that PC sitting in front of you and be able to deal with it then, counter it out or accept it.
Yeah. And certainly when you review the PC with your sellers, then you say, okay, this is going to cost you about $1,500, or this is going to cost you. And if there are termites, it could cost you $5,000, right? What are we talking about here? So yeah, making people aware of the consequences of those paragraphs. Thank you. All right, cost fees required in providing documentation, right? So if this were a condo, you're required to pay for the current and most up-to-date condominium documents. Oh, we've got copies of them already. We already have all our documents. I'm sorry, sir. I'm gonna have to kindly insist that we use the document service because your documents may not be the most up-to-date and the most current, and they may also not be complete. And so the cost for this is somewhere around $300–400. Correct me if I'm wrong, for these documents. And that way the liability of providing accurate documents actually goes with that document providing company. So we highly recommend you do that and we not use yours. Additionally, we can't hand over paper. Everybody wants everything now done electronically. So if you've got it in paper, we wouldn't be able to do that anyway. All right. Any other fees or costs that the seller is obligated to or agrees to be responsible for in the purchase contract? If you agree to repair something, right, then obviously those costs would come up for you. All right, any other authorizations and consents? Other brokerage firms, seller authorizes the brokerage firm to cooperate. We already talked about that with the other company. Other clients, brokerage firm may have agreements with other sellers to market and sell other properties, right? So you know that we're brokers, we have other listings. Release of information, you agree to release the information about the property for the MLS, and you consent to the publication of the property information. This is now about FERPTA HARPTA. So I am just here to make you aware that should you be moving either to the mainland or to a foreign country, Canada or wherever you might be going, should you be doing that, there will be a withholding. Now, people ask me and say, well, how does that work? Well, so here's how I explain it. Escrow needs to know where to send your money, where to deposit your money when the transaction closes. If they are given a local address and a local bank account to transfer the money to, that's all there is to know. The rest is between you and your accountant. If you give them a California address with a California bank account or a Canadian address with a Canadian bank account, there will be HARPTA and FERPTA, or just HARPTA, withheld. And the purpose of that is so that you are incentivized to pay taxes and to file your taxes in Hawaii, or if you're moving to Canada, file your taxes with the IRS. And you will file for a refund of the withholding, but there will be a withholding. So again, if this pertains to your client, clients are usually aware of this, but they need to know how much, and they need to know exactly what the amount is, because it's shocking. When you get that closing statement and there's 7.25% withheld, woo, it's a chunk. Okay. So, and for HARPTA, for FERPTA, it's even worse, because now we're talking like, what was that, like 15%? 15 something. Yes, it's 15%. So that's 22.25% that is withheld on that closing statement. So we definitely, you'd want to talk about this more if this were to apply. All right. And that just lets me go to the final page. Seller agrees to indemnify and defend and hold a brokerage firm harmless for, whatever the buyers might do, or for anything that you're claiming. Seller also acknowledges that seller's property will be marketed and promoted to the general public through photos, videos, and that conversation again, your material, your information is going to be out there, right? And seller expressly and voluntarily assumes all risks of loss, damage, or injury to seller, tenant, occupant, etc. It's a hold harmless clause that I can't be held responsible if, and the brokerage firm won't be held responsible for those types of incidences. So that's it. And now we can go to the attachment A. So that conversation we just had was a good example about survey and termite of the value of going over this. Using this to actually have that conversation, asking your sellers those questions. Are you planning bankruptcy? Is there a lien, another lien that's not recorded on this property? Is there whatever, is very, very valuable, right? For you to know in advance. And it's just a conversation you're having. So all I did was follow the forms. All I did was follow the form. So if you practice presenting this to your cat or dog, right? Just learn to speak it. It'll make a listing presentation so much easier and clear to our clients. Questions?
I have a suggestion. When signing a listing, I attach a flyer that it explains the HARPTA and FERPTA, and send it along with it. And I'll put it in my letter, a little sentence that, this is attached for your review. And that way they're not shocked, because I think most agents don't understand it and they're afraid of it. So they don't want to mention it, but it's a mistake. You should do the opposite. You should be more than happy to tell them too much and talk about it up front. And then you can even prepare sellers of property tax based on your list price, and it shows it. So that way everybody, it's all dealt with up front and there's no surprises.
Nice. I like it.
Question for you.
And every escrow company has a flyer like that. You just go to your favorite escrow company and get it.
Right.
Thanks.
Marion, I got one if you have, or a few if you have a quick minute. This is Steve. I think I got a little confused when you were discussing the listing period. I always thought the listing period is the day it goes to market, MLS and all that, but you mentioned photography and all that. Could you explain that a little more? That's supposed to be all done before the listing period. The listing period is supposed to start on the day it goes live, correct or no?
Yes, you are correct. You've got 2 days, right? 2 days to make it go live from the list date. So today is the 15th, right? And I dated this contract for the 21st. So if I
Okay.
was signing with my client today, I wanted to sign it today. But the listing date is a week from now, so that gives us those 7 days to have the photographer come in and do all of that.
Oh, go ahead, Lee. Yeah, is that on that?
Yeah, Marion, I could be incorrect on this, but I'm about 94.7% sure you have 1 day. 1 day.
No,
The
two.
way-
Everything is two. Everything is two. 48
Okay.
hours. 48
I
hours
will-
on the MLS.
I will
I
double
thought
check
they
that.
changed it too.
And back
Since
on
I'm
that
a-
note,
Since I'm
what
a
is the
member of
best?
the MLS committee.
Say that again,
Go
Lee.
ahead. I said
Oh, no,
I'll double check that since I'm a member of the MLS committee.
Oh, good.
So, you know, and this might just be advice from agents that have been doing this a lot longer, but when you're doing the song and dance, you go to the listing agent, all that, or listing presentation, and then you decide you want to move forward. That date can change a few times, just depending on a lot of things. So you just keep writing amendments, or you just kind of hold off on that, or what do you suggest?
Well, I do my best to kind of plan it out with my client. So we talk about what is it you're going to do? How much time do I need once you're done with all of that? And I can bring a photographer in. And if it's a month out, I want to sign that listing agreement today, but we're going to give it a month. And then if you're done in 3 weeks, we can write an amendment. Right? But I try my best to plan it out. Lee or anybody got any suggestions?
I kind of
no,
do
I'd
the
like to
same
get it
too. Oh, I'm sorry. You know, because a lot of times it's my HANA ones and I'm with them for months and I want to secure myself, yet they don't want to sign something maybe too soon in advance. So at some point I usually say honored before a certain date, and I let them know that I can always amend it and we can change it if they want more time. But at least this way it gives me a little security once they sign, even though I know it's not in until it's the date, to start working on because it's going to take me more than 7 days to get a photographer to HANA. So that's part of my whole listing presentation as well. Depends on where you're dealing with it.
Okay. So you can always put a date and you can always change it basically, but I've had it, yeah, where they were putting countertops in before and then the crew got COVID like several months back. And then so we had to delay it, and then there's been other things. So, okay, so that's pretty much changeable. That shouldn't be something to worry too much about. And does anybody have suggestions on listing periods? I know you mentioned, like, you know, Marion, you said, what's your go-to default? You know, no, don't cancel before this and those 2 little dates. Does anybody have a suggestion on that you just automatically go to?
Mine is 7 and 60 days, 90 maybe, but 7 days is the third puka and 60 or 90 days is the fourth puka.
Okay.
There are lots of different theories on this. I believe Todd Hudson's team does 1 day in the third puka and 30 or 60 days in the fourth puka. What do you do, Lee or Joyce?
Again, since most of my listings are in HANA, I give more time because a lot has already gone into it. And so I'm usually like 30, 60 days. However, I communicate that, you know, if something comes up and you really need to cancel for unforeseen reasons, I'm more than happy to put that in an email to do so.
I have a comment too. What I do is I don't typically go with a set listing period, but it sort of depends on the price for me. So if I feel like the listing is a little overpriced, I'll ask for a 1-year listing. And if it's a very competitive price where the people are really trying to sell it, I'll go with the 6-month listing. Generally try to lock in the first half of that so they can cancel within the first half of the listing period. So if it's a 6-month listing, see, it would be 3 months. Can't be canceled without mutual consent, and then the 90 days on the protection. But I think that to me, the term of the listing is part of the negotiation with the client, right? If they are very aggressive on their pricing, I'm going to want a longer listing period.
So what do you put for the third puka? The
cancellation?
Yeah.
Depends on the client again, but I would typically go 7 days.
7 days on the
Just gives
third.
me enough time to pull my protection list together. Some people
Right.
think it's cool to go 24 hours or 48 hours, but you also got to remember you kind of got to pull it all together and be organized too, and triggers the beginning of your getting your protection period and all that stuff.
So then what is your fourth puka? If you say 7 days, you can cancel in 7 days, but for how
But
long?
no sooner than halfway through the listing period.
So if it's a 6-month listing, 3 months, if it's a year-long listing, 6 months.
Correct.
So as long as everybody understands that that puka negates the third puka, right? The fourth puka says we have to mutually agree in writing. And the third puka says either one of us can cancel in writing and give notice to the other with 7 days notice. But if the fourth puka says 3 months, then the third puka doesn't apply until those 3 months are up, right? And some people write the fourth puka for the entire listing period. You are negating the third puka for the entire listing period. And for sellers who are paying attention, that feels funny. And having been in the situation where I wanted to fire somebody and the contract I was obligated to fulfill called for 30 days, I had to work for this nice person for 30 days when I didn't want to. So it applies to both sides. Just want to make that clear.
I just got a listing that was canceled with another company, and the other company's contract was a 1-year listing period, but they had no set period where they couldn't cancel.
Wow.
So the seller canceled the listing after 2 months, and they spent a lot of money on advertising and photos and video and all.
Right.
Dean, what's your go-to protection period, or Lee or anybody else?
I go 90 days. I've got one that inherited from this cancellation, which is 180 days. That is so annoying to me that you would have to wait 100. I almost didn't take the listing. If there wasn't so few listings, I wouldn't take that. In fact, I would renegotiate that to where if someone comes in 180 days and buys this property from underneath me, I have to get half of that commission, or I'm not doing this deal, right? Because that's unfair. I think 180 days is too long. And that's what a lot of these companies are doing. Most sellers don't know what they're signing.
Right.
I agree. I totally agree. I think it's the most awful clause. And if I get one of the first things I do is call the other listing agent and see if I can negotiate something. And if the other old listing agent won't share a commission with me, like after 2 months or something, I'll wait. Yeah,
it's too aggressive, and so now I'm making them pay 50% of all of their protection parties. So I'm not going to get dinged on any of those deals, because it's just too much.
Yeah. Cool. Other questions or comments?
I'll just comment one other thing is the idea of keeping it out of the MLS. There are 2 forms that are available to withhold a listing from the MLS. One is an exempt form. The other is participant only. So I see contracts come over my desk where in special terms they've written, the listing starts on this date, but we will not put it into the MLS until that date. That is not compliant with the MLS rules. You have to have either the exemption form or the participant form. If you have questions about that, you can call me.
Call your broker.
We just reviewed 2 from longtime brokers at MLS committee where people wanted to not pay their fines.
Yep.
Unfortunately, I haven't seen any from Keller Williams in a long, long time. So thank you very much.
Awesome. Anything else? All right, guys, it's 2 minutes to 1. We're ending early. No. Thank you so much for your attention. I look forward to seeing you in 2 weeks. We're going to talk about issues during escrow. Okay.
Thank you, Marion.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, Marion.
Thanks for all your good attention, everybody.
Hey, mahalo, Marion. Aloha.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.